Hey, what's up? It's Damon, and before we get into how God is not a CEO, definitely not, I gotta give you a special announcement for my faithful followers to follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon. Go over there, give me a follow, that little heart on the top corner, click that and click notifications because I'm going live for the very first time tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you're watching this after today, I'm gonna go live again, so go follow me on there and turn notifications on. I'll see you there tonight. Now on this channel, we usually talk about topics and news from a Christian leftist perspective, but there's times where it just feels like we're talking about stuff that feels practical and obvious. And unfortunately for many, some of the things we're talking about isn't practical and obvious. And I want to talk about something that's become extremely obvious to me, and it's that so many people who go to church today see God actually as a CEO, and that's terrible and wrong, and I'm going to talk more about it. So I've recently been reading this book, Unified, We Are a Force, How Faith and Labor Can Overcome America's Inequalities by Jorg Rieger and Rosemarie Henkel-Rieger. Some good stuff here. It's one of those books where like every page you're like, yes, of course. And there's this paragraph in the first chapter that just blew my mind, realizing how true it is and how much I've seen it all around me. And I immediately started talking about it with others and immediately realized I need to make a video about this. So let me read you this paragraph and then we'll get into it. He says, how we are shaped at work has implications for how we behave at home, in church, in community, in our families, and for how we think and believe. Men who experience dominance at work often embody it at home in relation to women and children. Many religious communities reflect how power is exercised at work, with people who have power at work having power in their communities. Those who sit on boards in corporations usually also sit on boards in church, and even if such leaders are absent, others fill in for them and perpetuate similar kinds of power structures. Finally, how power is exercised at work tends to influence in subtle ways how people perceive God. Even for working people, God is often modeled after images that combine traits of the immediate boss and the mostly invisible CEO. I read that and was like, I've seen that so much. I spent years in ministry, years in positions where people looked at me and others in my position and just immediately thought, oh, he's in that position, he's obviously closer to God than I am. And I hated that. I was fortunate enough to grow up with a youth pastor that made it a top priority whenever he was in front of people, whenever he was talking to students, he would always make it a priority to say, hey, we are equals here. Just because I'm up here doesn't mean that I'm better than you, that I'm more special than you, that I'm closer to God. We're in this together as equals, exploring this together. And when I became a youth minister, I also kind of took some of those traits and made that a priority of mine as well. But unfortunately, there are so many pastors out there who don't have that as a priority, and they just let it slip and let people think what they want, even if they don't think that they're better than everyone else at the church. And unfortunately, there are even some pastors that do think they're better than everyone in the church. If you're part of a church where it's obvious that the pastor thinks like that, please leave. Just leave immediately. It's bad, very cultish. But something that I saw again and again and again was I would meet people, a part of the churches I was a part of, who were working class, normal people who weren't involved in ministry, would just go because this was their community. And I would often see in conversations and the way they behaved and the way they interacted with other people and people in ministry is that there was this clear conception that those who are in ministry positions in my church are closer to God than me. And then the pastor above them is even closer to God than me. And then the district supervisor in the denomination above him is even closer to God than me. And then the top president of the denomination is even closer to God than me. I'm talking about a basic evangelical denominational Protestant model, but of course it's obvious within the Catholic Church as well. My priest is closer to God than me, the bishop is closer to God than me, the cardinal is closer to God than me, and the pope is even closer. Thus, God is just like the invisible CEO when we're a part of these very large corporations, and we know that I have no power, no say, almost no agency over my life, but my boss, he has a little bit more power than I do because he's my boss. And of course his boss has a little bit more power, and then their boss has a little bit more power, all the way up to the CEO. And the higher you are in this workplace, the closer you are to the CEO. That of course is how it works in corporations. But that isn't how it works when it comes to God. That is a gross misconception. And it's so prevalent within churches that I don't even blame pastors sometimes for not calling it out, because it's like so in your face that you can't even see it at times. Like, I've known pastors who, if you were to tell them that people in the church think that you have a closer relationship with God than them just because you're the pastor, I know some would be like, what? No. Even though it's true. Like, not only is that a culture perpetuated by the church, but if you're a minister, you have to intentionally dismantle that culture all the time if you want to not be in that type of culture. And I'm saying the reason it just naturally happens at church if you don't do or say anything about it is because so many of these people who are feeling this way spend most of their time at work, and their understanding of forces of great influence is more aligned with the invisible CEO. And therefore, when you talk about God and God having more power and influence on things, of course you're going to view it the same way, even if it's completely subconsciously. And here's the craziest part, which is why I really wanted to make this video. What's so wild is this normal working class guy who thinks that that minister is closer to God, and the pastor is even closer, and the district supervisor is even closer, and the pope's even closer than that, whatever. What's wild is that I very strongly see within the narrative of the Bible that what the Bible tells us is that God is actually even closer to him. It actually is the complete reverse, that the actual truth is those with the least amount of power, God is closest to. The less power you have, the more close to God you are. The more power you have, the farther you are from God, which is why there's so much language in the Bible about sacrifice, because it recognizes when you get in a position of power, do not take advantage of that power to exploit others. You must approach that position with a mind and heart of sacrifice, looking all around you to how you can distribute this power and not keep it to yourself. Because the more you just keep it to yourself, the more you just keep climbing the ranks, the farther you actually are from God. That is the narrative of the Bible. That's why Jesus says things like, whatever you do for the least of these, you did for me, Jesus. It's like the very sight of the manifestation of God, whatever God is to be found through the poor and the oppressed, through the working class guy who thinks he's just a normal guy and God doesn't really care as much about him as he does about the pastor. And it's interesting because I'm not saying that the truth is God is close to all of them equally. No, I'm saying God is closest to the one who is the lowest. And it's funny, I mentioned this to a friend and they're like, well, maybe not exactly. And I was like, no, definitely. Like, that's where I'm at in my life right now, as I strongly affirm that God chooses sides and always chooses the side of the poor and the oppressed, of the needy, of the least of these. To view God in a similar way that we view our invisible CEOs is literally the exact opposite of the type of God that the Bible talks about, okay? You know, I remember even seeing a book throughout the years whenever I would go to bookstores or libraries that is actually called God is My CEO. It's like spirituality for business leaders or whatever. I never opened that book. I never plan to either. I don't even know what that book is about, but it just sounds so gross and disgusting. I will never open that book. Even if I end up finding out that like the first page says, I'm being a little hyperbolic here. I don't really mean that. I'm just kidding. Let me tell you what I really mean. Even if that's what the first page says, no, definitely not. Because that's like the opposite of the message that I'm trying to spread on this channel and the message that I've encountered through Jesus. So there we go. God is not a CEO. God is not closer to those who are higher in power. God is closer to those who have less of it. That is the gospel. That is the good news. That is theology. That is God. Thank you so much for watching this. I appreciate you so much. Make sure you go check out my Twitch stream at 7 p.m. I'll see you there. Also subscribe for more videos like this. And also I would greatly appreciate it if you supported me on the Patreon, patreon.com/Damon Garcia. I ask for the support so I can afford to do these more often because I love creating this stuff and I love the community we're building. So also shout out to the Patreons who are there now. Karen in Colorado, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, Jacob McCarthy, Jack Theory Bleeb, and Mike Lodato. I love you all so much, and I thank you all so much. Join the team, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.